Hello and welcome everyone to Red Planet Live. I am your host, Ashton Zeth. I am elated to be hosting the Mars Society's podcast and leading the conversation about human exploration of the universe and the future settlement of Mars. As a longtime space enthusiast, I am passionate about STEM education and making humanity an interplanetary species. So thank you everybody for joining today and supporting Red Planet Live. Now, before we kick off the conversation, I have just a couple Mars Society announcements that I want to mention. The first is that the Mars Technology Institute, MTI, has launched the Mars Against Hunger Prize, which is a global competition to develop innovative food production technologies for sustaining human life on Mars. With traditional greenhouse methods proving inefficient for large-scale settlements, MTI seeks alternative biotechnologies like methane-based protein production. And these advancements could not only support future Mars missions, but also combat hunger on Earth. So innovators worldwide are invited to participate in shaping the future of space and global food security. So check out that link. Oh, there we go. That QR code, scan that right there, and it'll take you to the website and you can check out more about the Mars Against Hunger Prize. And second announcement, so I just have to say, for those listeners, I know we have a lot of repeat audience members, but I just wanted to say, hey, if you are enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to rate us on Spotify and Apple. Your support helps us reach more space enthusiasts and bring you even better content. And we sincerely appreciate the support for Red Planet Live. So give us a rating on the platforms that you use to stream the podcast. All right, so for the fun stuff, today, going to be speaking with a new guest. Her name is Shelli Brunswick. She is a distinguished leader in the global space ecosystem and is renowned for her advocacy for space technology and innovation. She is a former U.S. Air Force officer and former Chief Operating Officer of the Space Foundation. She is now the CEO and founder of SB Global. Shelli bridges the space community and the broader public, fostering collaborations that drive the industry forward. As a prolific keynote speaker and author, she engages audiences on leadership, career success, and the practical applications of space technologies. Shelli also works with global think tanks and contributes to initiatives shaping the future space paradigm. Her support for underrepresented groups has earned her recognition, including as one of the top 100 women of the future in emerging technology and recipient of not one, but 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards. Shelli was also included in the 100 Voices of Our Planet, an initiative of the United Nations Environment Program, recognizing individuals for their contributions to sustainability and global environmental challenges. Shelli, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to join you on the Red Planet.
So excited to be chatting with you. And, you know, with your background, I know this is going to be a great conversation. I'm excited to learn from you today.
I think it'll be very mutually beneficial to both of us. I look forward to learning from you as well.
Well, thank you. Well, we always start each segment of the podcast with a segment called Question of the Day. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just meant to be an icebreaker, and we love to see what people put in the comments as well. So today's question of the day is, would you rather take a vacation on the moon or a space station?
Ooh, do I get to answer that too?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, I want to hear you.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to seeing people's responses. And when they respond, if you put in the comments where you are, because I can see that, and that'd be great to see where everybody's at today on planet Earth and where you want to take that vacation. I think initially I would look at a space station just because that's more near term. You could do that right now. You could go with SpaceX. You could go to the International Space Station. Private astronauts have done that from Israel and other countries. So I think near term, that would be the easiest and fastest way to take an off-planet vacation. And then obviously longer term, in the next few years, we could look at something maybe going around the moon, maybe not landing on the moon yet. And then hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years, you could do it to the moon. And then obviously we know we'll eventually be able to go to Mars, but that will be not just a vacation. That's going to be a long trip.
It's a long journey for sure. I love the practical answer there. You know, you're thinking about timeline, you're thinking about like logistics, how do we get there, where do we go next? I love that answer. So starting with the space station, then the moon. I would say
I'm that military officer. You got to think practical, you know, logistic wise. What can I do right now? What can I do long term?
That makes complete sense. I expect nothing less from that answer. I would say for myself, I went straight to like the surface of the moon. I want to be able to follow in those footsteps, of astronauts like, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and ending with, Gene Cernan. So getting to walk on the surface and kind of bounce around, I think would be fun. But I like your answer about the space station, and maybe that would be a close second, because obviously you could go a lot other locations than just the surface of the moon. So let's see. We're going to see if there's a couple comments here. I want to see what some of the others are saying. We'll pop one on there. So Bill Carton, he is one of our Mars Society ambassadors. So we're going to show his answer there. Okay, he said moon can be limited in time with a quick emergency return capability. I like your answer there, Bill. Oh, yeah, another one for him. There we go. He means low Earth orbit. Okay, we got a couple there.
The practicality that we could go to the ISS now, like you could get on a rocket and go, is realistic. The ability to go to the moon, not so much human form, but we're sending a lot of great things there. My good friend Ben Haldeman is sending stuff for LifeShip. So there's a lot of things that we're sending to the moon to start that process of what it would be like to have a colony, settlement on the moon. Will we be on the planet, on the moon surface, not a planet, but on the surface, or we'll be in a lava tube. So there's a lot of logistics to figure out with that. Of course, as soon as we have Gateway, you could always go back and forth and stay on Gateway and just go down to the moon and come back. So lots of fun things we can talk about the moon tonight, if that's the way our conversation goes.
Hey, I'm sure we'll get some of those questions. We typically will get to cover moon, Mars, and everything in between. But you mentioned your background in military, so I thought that might be a good place for us to start. Can you talk a little bit about your journey from the U.S. Air Force to becoming a leader in space, and how did you get on this path?
Absolutely. So I like to share that my journey has 4 chapters. And that first chapter is right out of high school. I joined the Air Force. So I enlisted in the Air Force because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to college. I'm sure many people feel that way. I didn't have college money, and I'm sure many people know what that is like. And I wanted to see the world. And back in the 80s, the best way to see the world was to join the military. So I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. I was stationed in Turkey. I was a personnel specialist, so HR, human resources. So I learned a profession. I got to see the world. And I was able to go to school at night. So I even started that college education. And so it was a wonderful way. And I did that my first 12 years in the Air Force. I was an enlisted airman, went to school at night and on the weekends, completed both my bachelor's and master's degrees, going to school at night, was able to apply and become an officer in the Air Force. And the Air Force made me a space acquisition officer or procurement officer. So I transitioned after 12 years as an enlisted airman to becoming an officer in the Air Force. And what procurement means is, somebody has to buy or oversee the buying of those satellites and launch vehicles and ground stations. So it was a really exciting, big transition. Did I think it would happen? I never had a dream that I'd be in the space industry. So it was super cool. And not only did I do all those procurements of rockets and ground stations and satellites, but I also got to teach at Defense Acquisition University. I taught the space procurement life cycle. And then I culminated my career working on Capitol Hill as a legislative liaison. So understanding how the government allocates its resources, how the Air Force got its money, how it allocated its money to the space assets. And I was in the Air Force before Space Force came along. So that's why I did space procurement. So after 29 years in the Air Force, I retired, and I was fortunate that the Space Foundation was looking for their next chief operating officer. So I was fortunate to become the next chief operating officer at Space Foundation, an amazing team. Many people may know Space Foundation for their world-class space symposium that takes place every April in Colorado Springs. So it's a fabulous event. They also do educational programs. They have an international teacher liaison program. So if you're a teacher, you can apply for that program. They do art contests. They have a lot of other programs that are educational. So after 9 years of being part of Space Foundation, I really realized that I wanted to be that entrepreneur. I wanted to be the person that could kind of be from the space industry and bridge to the general public. Be that communicator. So I retired or resigned, or however you do that. I retired from the Air Force. I'm not sure how working in the civilian world works, but I left Space Foundation after 9 years, and then started my own company, SB Global LLC, where I'm doing a lot of outreach and education, less about formal education K through 12, but more about educating the general public, how space impacts our daily lives, how going to Mars, you just talked about the need for food. And a lot of people may not realize that, everything we figure out that we do on Mars for food, we can use that here on Earth for food. So it has a real benefit from the moon, Mars into Earth. So being that communicator, as well as writing articles and a strategic advisor. I serve on several board of directors. So it's a wonderful journey I've been on the last year. So I like to let people know you may be an entrepreneurial thinker. You can be an entrepreneurial thinker no matter where you are, if you're working for someone else, or you can start your own company like I did and be an entrepreneur, which has its pluses and minuses. And we can talk about that as well. So that's a little bit about my journey.
I love it. Okay, well, I want to dive into each of those chapters. But, one of the things that I'd be curious to talk about is, there's a lot of people like myself that work in other industries. Like I work in tech. I'm in tech sales, and I have always been interested in space and knew I wanted to start to make that transition. And that's how I got involved with the Mars Society. And now I'm in the Thunderbird School for Global Management, working on a space program. And so there's a lot of individuals like me that want to make that transition. What advice would you give to young professionals that either, don't know where they're going? Maybe they're interested in space, but they don't know how to start. Or you've got individuals like myself that are currently in industry, but want to make that transition to space. What advice would you give those people?
Awesome. So that is something I'm writing in my next book, what's called What Space Got to Do with It? An Interstellar Guide to Success. And so what it really comprises is three things: awareness, access, and action. And what I mean by awareness is exactly what we're doing tonight. We're creating awareness that there's opportunity in the space industry. And we can talk more about that later. But, when 60 years ago for the Apollo mission, you either worked for a government, you were from one of two countries, you were a male, you were a STEM professional, and that's how we went to the moon and returned safely. Now there's commercial space. We need all the career fields from high school graduate to PhD, manufacturing sector to astronauts and rocket scientists and everything in between. So there's never been a better time. And you don't have to just be a young professional like Space Generation Advisory Council age, the SGAC. For those of you who are not part of SGAC and you're under 35, fabulous organization. But I've even talked to mid-career people. They were in sales, like pharmaceutical sales or health tech sales. And they were like, I always wanted to be in the space industry, but there wasn't a place for me. We didn't need salespeople when it was government run space industry. Now that it's commercial, you need salespeople. So people who are mid-career can transition. They can go to like the Thunderbird School, like you mentioned, or they could go to the International Space University and they can learn. And then they can start going to these conferences. They can network. They can build their relationships. They can join the Mars Society. They can find a mentor through the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. And they can network into the space industry and make that transition. And I've seen individuals, as we know from a mutual friend, Desmond, who started in Cameroon and came all the way through the Thunderbird School and now is in the United States doing space, to I've seen mid-career individuals who've left the oil and gas industry and are now in the space industry. So it's never been a better time for anyone. And if you're interested, that awareness, access, and action.
Yeah, that lays out a great framework for opportunities and ways for people to get involved. I remember reading in a book by Kelly Girardi, not necessarily rocket science. She was saying that just start by volunteering. Look for an organization where you can volunteer your time and your effort, get your foot in the door, and you'll start to see those opportunities open up. And that's how I originally found, the Mars Society. I was looking for a way to get involved and, join an organization, and here we are. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There's lots of opportunities out there. So find the awareness, and take that action. But you mentioned that was in your upcoming book. So tell us about your book that you already have out called What's Space Got to Do with It? 10 Lessons for Personal Growth. I know in the book that you address, applying some of the space insights to leadership and innovation. Can you talk through what that looks like? Give us an example of that application.
Absolutely. Well, we were just talking about chapter 1 right now, which is take advantage of opportunities. So I shared during my journey when I was enlisted airman, I had the opportunity to take advantage of tuition assistance, which is the Air Force helped pay for my college, and I went to school at night and on the weekend. Now I had to give up my weekends or evenings to do homework or go to class. But by doing that and taking advantage of that tuition assistance, I was able to apply and become an officer. But you talked about it as well. In the book, I interview 30 global thought leaders, and each chapter has 3 of those interviews. And in that first chapter, Dr. Chidima Aroka Joy is in there, and she is with the Nigerian Space Agency, and she talks about taking advantage of opportunities. And sometimes opportunities, she calls it unpaid work. That's how they phrase it in Africa, but we would call it volunteering. So just like you said, volunteer. I know a lot of people, you start volunteering for SGAC or IISL, you know, which is the International Institute of Space Law, UNUSA, Women Tech Network, G100, the Mars Society. You start volunteering, and that helps build your network. You learn the language, you learn the culture of space. You get to meet people, you go to the conferences, and that networking is what helps you find those career opportunities. So like you said, take advantage of opportunities. That's chapter 1. Chapter 2 is try anyways, even when the odds are against you. So we know in the space industry, it is challenging. We've seen some wonderful footage of, you know, SpaceX or other activities that, you know, have anomalies, which means they didn't quite achieve what they wanted, but they learned a lot. And SpaceX has a great video, you know, how not to land a rocket, I think it's what it's called. And it kind of shows a lot of their great mishaps, they'll call them. But when I applied to become an officer, so I'm not a STEM professional. So I'm a traditional space person because I came in through the military, but I'm also non-traditional because I don't have a STEM background. I have a business background. Both my bachelor's and master's are in business. So at the time I applied to become an officer, the Air Force was looking for STEM professionals. So I did not have very good selection rate. And on the first time I applied, I was not selected. So what I tell people is that means it just, what's plan B? What's plan C? What's plan D? But at that time, the Air Force would automatically send your application to another selection board. So you could update it or you could not. You could just let it ride. Well, I chose to update it because I always wanted to know, like, I gave my best effort. So I updated my application. I rewrote it. I got new letters of recommendation. I tried to reposition myself, how the selection committee would see me in the best light. And on that second selection board, I was accepted. So I share with your audience, you know, space is hard. Coming into this industry is challenging. Just like any industry, it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. You know, you volunteer, you find paid opportunities, you read books, you network, you go to conferences, but hard work. And when I worked on Capitol Hill, they called it, you know, shoe leather, you know, walk in the hall. So you put that shoe leather in and it will happen for you too.
It brings up a conversation I had. It reminds me of a conversation I had with astronaut Jose Hernandez after his movie came out, and talking about how he had applied to the NASA astronaut program. I think it was 12 times was how it was, and you know, getting rejected, and like, okay, what do I do? How do I level up my skills so that when I reapply again, I'm one step closer to where I want to be and being selected. So yeah, the persistence, the tenacity, and like, hey, how can I enable myself to be prepared for that next opportunity?
And I talk about Jose in the book as well. He's amazing. And his story is, you know, it's not failure. Just take that failure and make it FAIL. First attempt in learning. That's what I did. That's what Jose did. You're not failing, you're learning. The best lessons I've ever learned is because I didn't accomplish the goal the first time. So just keep learning. And as we see with technology today, we need to be lifelong learners. That's in the book as well. We need to continue to learn, reskill, upskill, both formal, like you at Thunderbird, as well as informal opportunities.
You know, some of the lessons that are in your book, I think, are going to be applicable to a lot of people that are listening. What inspired you initially to write a book?
Well, what inspired me is twofold. The first thing is I've been a mentor for many years, and I would have proteges say, you know, after we do a mentoring session, they'd say, oh man, do you have a book? Do you have this written down somewhere? Or I'd do a speech and people would say, oh, do you have this written down somewhere? And I didn't. And then the other thing was I was invited to be the Colorado State University Pueblo commencement speaker. And so as I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, I talked to the president at the time, Dr. Mote, and he was like, look, keep it real. These kids don't know what they're doing tomorrow. Talk about your setbacks. Make it real to them. What's on social media, he didn't say this, but what I share with you, what we see on social media is not the real world. Every day is, so keep it real. So I kept it real. And so the first 3 lessons in the book are from that commencement address. I also, in 2022, I also did a TEDx Manitou Springs talk where which was titled, "What Space Got to Do with It?" My coach came up with the title for the talk, and then I just pulled that title for the book, and then each book in the series will just have a different subtitle. So it's kind of a culmination of my journey and my career, getting feedback from people that it was just the right time to start writing this down.
Okay. And so you're working on your next book as well. So what exactly is that one going to cover, and when can we expect that one to come out?
Awesome. So as I shared, that one's called An Interstellar Guide to Success. And that one's going to be, I'm going to talk about you're going to get the 10 lessons, and there's lots of good things in there. It's not only the stories, but it also has the last part of it is called Turning Insights into Action. So it gives people real tangible things they could do next. Just like if you were talking to me in a mentoring session, here's what you could do next. Here's some things you could do next. So it has real application. The next book is really called An Interstellar Guide to Success. So it's really about how do you as an individual or a company accomplish your goals. And so it has those 3 main pieces, which is awareness, access, and action. So that first piece, awareness, is what we're doing now. People have to be aware. What do they want? It's easier to find things now than ever before, but also get lost in the internet. So, being focused in your awareness and creating awareness. And that's what we're doing tonight with this podcast. The book, all of these are building awareness that there are opportunities for you, whether it's in the space industry or another industry, because I also promote technology as well as entrepreneurship. There's lots of ways to find your path. That second one is access points. How do you find access points? Well, you found one through the Thunderbird School, or International Space University has access points, or getting a scholarship to the International Space Congress. For some individuals, the only way they could go to those type of events is if they got a scholarship to be there, or they win an award. Because if you win an award in an emerging space country, that award, you're going to be on national TV and you're going to get accolades, but you're also going to build more awareness in your community and country about the space industry. You could also join like NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. So if you're an entrepreneur, you could find these access points. And then that third step is taking action. And that includes training, networks, and mentoring. We talked a little bit, formal and informal opportunities, whether you're just reskilling, taking a class, reading a book, watching a webinar. So there's lots of ways to continue to be a lifelong learner. You can join those networks. We listed a lot of those as well. And then you can find a mentor. Many times mentors can help you leapfrog to get to that next step a lot faster. So that's what the next book's about. And hopefully we'll have it out. I'm gonna try for World Space Week.
There we go. Okay, perfect timing. You mentioned a lot about mentorship and being a mentor and wanting to mentor others. What's the best way for somebody to find a mentor? Like, what if you're somebody like myself that I'm in the program now, so I've got those connections, but say I didn't have that and I'm somebody that works in a different industry and I want to get into space. How do I find a mentor?
I think there's a number of ways, and there are those formal programs like right now the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs does not have a formal mentoring program for space for women, but it still has the women listed that have been mentors in the past. So you could always go to that website, see if there's somebody that might be akin to what you're wanting to do. And although it says space for women, it's open to men and women mentors as well as proteges. There's also Women Tech Network. So if you want to be in the technology industry, the entrepreneurial industry, open again to men and women, both mentors and proteges. Space Generation Advisory Council. So what I would say is, again, it can start with that awareness of doing that Google search, find a mentor, and see what you can find. And even on LinkedIn, sometimes people reach out on LinkedIn. You can't mentor everybody, but I do try. If somebody sends me a quick question or asks me something, I definitely will give them those tips like, hey, try this or check that. So sometimes you can just reach out to somebody and ask them, can I have 15 minutes of your time? I'm really trying to do this. Or like you said, one of the best ways to get mentoring is volunteer for one of those organizations that you think you want to join. And you'll find people who will just give you ideas and insights without it maybe being formal mentoring. Maybe it's more informal, but you'll learn a lot from that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. As I'm going along through the Thunderbird program and starting to make those connections and getting to meet people, whether it's through Thunderbird or through the Mars Society, getting to make these connections in interview and through podcasting, I've made a lot of great relationships and, finding some mentors that way as well. So yeah, just getting yourself out there and introducing yourself, even if it's a quick LinkedIn message, it opens the door and you might find somebody that you really hit it off with.
Absolutely. I get the, like I said, I check my own LinkedIn. I don't have an EA doing that. And I will answer, again, I ask people be realistic because LinkedIn is secondary email, but I do actually go through all those. I try to go through weekly. And again, it won't be a full-on mentoring session, but it might give you some ideas of some websites you could check or some other individuals that might be able to help you. But LinkedIn is a great tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great place to start. If you don't know where to start, go to the place where there's a lot of professionals, and LinkedIn is a good place to do that. Well, I was curious to hear a little bit about your insights. So we talked a little bit about your 4 chapters of your life, and now you're at the stage where, hey, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm doing these different business ventures now. But I'm curious to hear your opinion about the transition of the space industry from traditional military government-led. We're starting to see more commercial companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin and Rocket Lab and et cetera. We're starting to see more of that. How do you see us balancing the evolution between the public sector to the private sector?
So again, I think for your audience, most of them probably know that, during the Apollo era, it was 2 countries in a space race, government workers, they were STEM professionals, primarily male.
Yep.
So here we are 60 years later, and the government is now seeing space as a service. So up until the commercial crew legislation that authorized SpaceX and Blue Origin to start creating commercial rockets, the government did all of the rockets. They built them all, they managed them all, and they did all of that. Now the government is getting out of that. They now see launch as a service. They're going to create a payload, which is a satellite. They're going to select the launch vehicle that can provide the service to get it into orbit. So as they got out of that business, that cleared the commercial opportunity to allow commercialization. And as we know, SpaceX came in and drastically lowered the cost curve. And why that is so important is it has now made access to space to do all of these activities. Like launch itself is not the biggest thing that's happening in space. Launch is an enabler to allow all those things to happen in space. And I'm going to come to that in a second. But by bending the cost curve to get to space, it's now created access not only for the US government, but also, commercial entities, satellite services, emerging space nations, communications, and so many more. So by lowering the cost curve, so we can see where industry can come in and create a different return on investment and lower the cost. And now you're seeing that next evolutionary wave where you're looking at NASA and the Air Force and stuff getting out of low Earth orbit, getting out of space stations. You're going to decommission the International Space Station by 2030. All these commercial space stations are now competing to be commercial space stations. So there's a lot of opportunities as the government backs out and allows the commercial sector to come in, which creates all these new career opportunities, as well as products and services. So I talked about the launch, but when you think about space, it's also here on Earth. Like we're using a telecommunication platform. This technology was invented by the Apollo era. So all telecommunication, all the Zooms, all the things you're doing on Teams is all thanks to the space industry. So every day people are using space applications and they're not even aware of it. So the more the government steps out of the space industry and empowers entrepreneurs and investors to take over that space, they're going to create economic opportunity that all of us citizens get to benefit from. And that's in agriculture, healthcare, communications, artificial intelligence, robotics, miniaturization, etc. And a great place to look, if you're an entrepreneur or investor, is to go to the NASA Tech Transfer website. There are thousands of patents that are waiting to be commercialized by you. Our government has found this technology, they've patented it, and now they're waiting for you to apply for that patent and potentially a grant to start to commercialize that technology. So great opportunities for commercialization and investors.
Okay, say that website one more time. So for those that are trying to type it into their search bar real quick, say it one more time.
Absolutely. So it's the NASA Tech Transfer Office. You can Google it. And for your European folks, there's a ESA, the European Space Agency, also has a tech transfer office, as does the Japanese Space Agency, JAXA. But the US government has the most patents. So NASA has those patents, the US Air Force and Air Force Research Lab, the Department of Energy. So there's lots of those. Some of those are classified, so you have to be a US citizen with certain clearances. But some of those, like I said, are agriculture, telecommunications, healthcare, anybody, not anybody, but you have to apply for the patent and go through the process. But NASA has people that are waiting to help you do that.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, is there any particular technology, some sort of innovation that you're really excited by as we're starting to see the commercialization of space? For example, I had an opportunity to interview the president of Max Space, and they're creating inflatable space habitats. And was it maybe I think it was Black Star Orbital, but we heard from somebody that they were launching small CubeSats, and you could put in a wedding ring, and you could have it launch and bring it back, and this diamond was in space, and you give that to your significant other. Those were some cool things that I hadn't really thought of. So is there something particularly that you're excited by?
I'm really excited by healthcare innovation because it takes a long time for healthcare applications to come to market. People are waiting with these diseases, and one of those is done by Dr. Nicole Wagner. She runs Lambda Vision. And while she was getting her PhD, she was looking at individuals who go blind as they get older with macular degeneration. There is no cure for this. And what she realized is she could grow, 3D print a lens replacement on the International Space Station. Now, she is not a space person. That's the other part. Not a space person. She's a doctor. She's a medical doctor. But she realized by doing her business case, it made more sense to 3D print that protein layer in microgravity, and then have it come back to Earth and then use it in human eyes. Now, it's going through the FDA processes. NASA is working with her, Space Tango. But I think that's the most exciting part, is that everyday citizens, and again, Dr. Nicole Wagner is not an everyday citizen, but she's a doctor who wants to find a cure to help people that go blind with age-related disease. And this is an opportunity to help bring sight back to millions of people around the world. And it just happens to be the best return on investment is to manufacture it in space, in microgravity environment. And there's so many more applications like that. Osteoporosis treatment, so many more applications. They're doing cancer research. So as we take more of these things off planet to research them in microgravity environment and bring them to market, we can do it faster. And then when we add in artificial intelligence, it's going to be a total game changer to how we can help create better, healthier lifestyles and lives for people here on the planet who are suffering from diseases that could one day be curable.
Yeah, that's incredible. And back to your point earlier, how space is helping us here on Earth. Yeah, that's really exciting. Tell us the name of that organization again, the pharma company.
It's Dr. Nicole Wagner, and she's with Lambda Vision.
Lambda Vision. Okay. Yeah. So for anybody that, is, again, looking this up as soon as you're talking about it, they know what to go Google search. But you mentioned artificial intelligence. So let's pull on that thread a little bit. As I mentioned, I work in tech, and of course, AI is the big buzzword and everything tech related. How do you see AI helping with the space industry?
Well, I think AI is really exciting. There's a number of things. One, we can think about as we look to the cosmos, we can use artificial intelligence. We have the James Webb Space Telescope that's helping us see back to the earliest moments of the formation of our galaxy. And to process that data, artificial intelligence can do it so much faster. We can see satellite information that's coming off the satellites that artificial intelligence can process so much faster and provide answers to humans in the loop. So it's a really exciting time as we explore beyond planet Earth. We're already using artificial intelligence on Mars. We've got the Mars rovers. They're doing autonomous actions already. artificial intelligence, autonomous actions, without a human in the loop. They know what to do. They know to go into safe mode. They know how to determine drilling and things. So we're already using some of that AI as we continue to explore, but it's going to even get better. And then the other exciting part is, how do we tie it in here on Earth? And like I said, one of those exciting areas that will really have leaps and bounds is in the healthcare application, because right now it can take 10 or more years to bring a new pharmaceutical to market to ensure it's safe, it's healthy. When we think about the different cancers, doing cancer research, actually finding a solution to cancers and treating them. So as we take artificial intelligence with space technology, it's just going to really create an amazing new world, and I'm excited for it. And and I'm going to say, I know a lot of people have pluses and minuses about AI, but I think AI is going to be an enhancement to jobs. It's going to help us all be more productive. And the only people who are going to be replaced might be the people who don't want to learn how to use artificial intelligence. I'm hearing from people. One of the I have an article coming out in Forbes Technology Council in the next day or two on the future of work, and I even talk about how at Lowe's, the hardware store where you go, Lowe's, like Lowe's, Home Depot, Lowe's, they are partnered with NVIDIA. So we all know NVIDIA from chips, which, by the way, part of the chip technology comes from the space industry. It's all in the article. You'll read it. But NVIDIA is now helping Lowe's with artificial intelligence. They've got sensors in the stores. They can tell when a customer is looking and an associate might be somewhere else. They alert the associate to go help the customer. So, how many times have you been in a hardware store and you can't find somebody to help you? Now the artificial intelligence will let the Lowe's associate know that you're looking for something. They're going to come help you. So we're integrating artificial intelligence throughout every industry, whether it's in the space industry or brick and mortar stores where we go to buy some nails. Artificial intelligence is going to be part of all our lives. And like I said, it's just going to help that Lowe's sales associate be a better customer service, because they know their customers in aisle 11 and they were in aisle 24. So it's just going to help us do a lot of things better.
That's a really cool, practical, like everyday application. Go into Lowe's and you're trying to find something. If I can't find something, I'm usually on my phone on the website looking up like, what aisle is this on, rather than going and ask for help. So, hey, if somebody knew that I needed that help, they could see where I was at on which aisle. Hey, maybe I could find those nails a little bit faster. Let's see. Well, I don't think I said it because we jumped right into conversation, but if you have questions, please submit those in the chat. I do have one so far that I wanted to read, because we were just talking about the commercialization. So the question is, given your expertise in space procurement, what do you see as the next major opportunity for commercialization in the space industry?
Well, that is really exciting. I think there's a lot of opportunities. As we look to what can NASA get out of, I'm going to start with that. We know, similar to rockets, where they started putting out all the contracts for the launch vehicles, and then you had SpaceX and Blue Origin and so many on and on. Now you've seen contracts for space stations. And you can see a myriad of contracts that they've given to multiple organizations, so that they have several different space stations, because as they look to decommission the International Space Station, then you're going to look at commercial space stations. And like right now, the International Space Station is super busy, right? You're doing government experiments, there's activities the astronauts have to do, and then there's these other experiments they do for the National Laboratory, the ISS National Lab. And so they're pretty maxed out. So I just talked about pharmaceuticals and all these other things. There's not a lot of room for that on the International Space Station. So as you look at these commercial space stations, you're going to look at being able to take a lot of this activity off, research, healthcare activities, into microgravity environment. That's really going to benefit life on Earth. So I think that's the next big wave, is the government kind of pulling back out of low Earth orbit and allowing that to be more commercial as we look to go onto the moon and then on to Mars, which is where NASA and other space agencies can be focusing their activities to help us get to that settlement on the moon, and then eventually, how do we get a settlement on Mars?
Speaking of the settlement on Mars, obviously Elon is a big proponent. He always wears that Occupy Mars t-shirt. and he's kind of leading that wave. I know, like from a NASA perspective, they were focused on SLS and the Artemis program and getting humans, the first woman, first person of color, back to the moon. But Elon is like, no, we need to go to Mars. What do you think is the gap from a entrepreneurial, from a business perspective? Where is the gap to get humans to Mars? Obviously, you've got government regulation in there, but Elon seems to be leading that charge. How are we going to get there from a business perspective?
Well, Elon's leading the charge and he's doing parts of it, right? Tesla is really a battery, because we know that the current batteries and battery storage that we have is not going to work on the moon or Mars long term. We're going to need different kinds of battery and battery storage. So that's part of what he's working with Tesla and Solar City and SpaceX. So he's looking at getting us there, and maybe how we look at the energy and energy storage challenges we're going to have. We're probably going to have nuclear too as well. So it's solar's just, the challenge of solar on Mars especially is difficult, because you're so far from the sun, plus you have these big dust storms. Right. So there's a lot of challenges, and those are the things that we would really have to dig into. Whereas the moon, we have a really good understanding of the moon, although moon dust gets everywhere, gets into everything. There is a company that's kind of working on that. We have a better understanding of the moon, what it would be to go to the moon and go back and forth to the moon. A lot easier. Again, easier is a relative term. It's still very hard. Let me make that clear, but easier. The moon, on the other hand, has so many other challenges beyond just what Elon wants to resolve, which is the rocket to get us there, and maybe energy and energy storage. You even talked about it. How are we going to grow food? The other challenge is the human factor. We're human beings. We were born and raised on a planet with gravity and a shield that protects us. We have an atmosphere. Once we leave the protection of Earth, we are exposed to cosmic rays, the solar winds. Without gravity, we've seen women develop exponential osteoporosis in space. Men have problems with their eyes. There's a lot of challenges. Your fluids in your body have a challenge without gravity. And I recommend you have Dr. Vanessa Farsadaki on a future call, because she is the mother of astromedicine. She's also an alumni of yours. So through Arizona State University, absolutely. She went through the Thunderbird program as well 2 years ago with her husband, Carlton Johnson, who is the chairman and CEO of the National Space Society. So she will tell you all about the challenges of human beings living off planet. So getting there, we can probably get there, staying there and raising food and having a reliable energy source. And can we live there for multiple years with a reduced atmosphere and all of those things? Those are some things we really have to better understand. And there are some, like the German Space Agency is doing some research on human beings off planet, measuring the radiation and the impact. So there's a lot of things that we're going to have to figure out. And there's a saying, slow is fast and fast is smooth. So I'm not saying we have to go back to the moon first before we go to Mars, but we definitely have to solve many of these major, and I'll call them wicked problems, which is a project management term, for some of these challenges that we have. And I know, like you said, there are a lot of organizations that are looking to solve them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the Mars Society launched the Mars Technology Institute, and MTI is working on addressing the food problem. But the Mars Society owns the Mars Desert Research Station, which is an analog facility, and at MDRS they are currently growing different plants, like tomatoes specifically, in the Mars regolith simulant, to try to simulate how could we grow plants on Mars, because obviously food and feeding the humans that are there is going to be a major issue. And in addition to, like you said, energy, that's going to be another concern as well. So there are organizations that are currently working on that. But getting there, like you said, is not the only problem. There's a myriad, a whole other list of things that we have to solve to get humans there.
And other than going there to say you've gone there, what do we want to go there for? What's our passion? Like we know with the moon, there's a lot of things that we can do on the moon. There's helium-3 that can be mined. That's energy. We know the moon has, water so that we can create rocket fuel. We have water.
Mhm.
We can create oxygen.
Yeah.
Once the biggest expense is getting off the planet.
Hmm.
And so if we can create a station on the moon where we don't have to keep sending things, payloads up from the Earth, and we can do the manufacturing in space on the moon to go on to Mars or anywhere else we want to, it'll be a lot easier. So again, easier is a relative, again, easy in the space industry is a relative term. I'm sure the emails are coming in. Easy living on the moon. It's not easy. But what I share is that there's a lot of opportunity once we're off the planet to do a lot of these activities. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a human there. It could be a human on Gateway, which is like a space station orbiting the moon, which is smaller than our current space station, where people can go back and forth to the moon. A lot of it could also be done by robotics. And again, that artificial intelligence will be a key component. So I'm not saying we have to go to the moon before we go on to Mars. But the moon could be a good stepping stone to go on to Mars and beyond.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I love what you mentioned. You've talked about like, hey, I'm not a traditional STEM person, but like I have that background in the military, and that's helped me as I've gone on this journey to working and leading in space. I'm curious, to learn from you, like, what are some top leadership lessons from businesses, or lessons that the businesses can learn from the space industry? It goes both ways. The space is helping Earth, but Earth is obviously helping the explore space. So what are some of those lessons, leadership or innovation lessons, that businesses can learn from the space industry?
Well, that's so great. I do have another book in this series that's going to be called Out of This World Leadership. So I'll tell you a little about that, and then I'll come back to the other part of your question. The three main things that's in Out of This World Leadership that leaders of today and into the future need to be is inspirational, authentic, and have gratitude. Now, I'm not saying space leaders have the cornerstone on those attributes, but obviously if you're in the space industry, you're inspirational, right? You're putting a vision out there, you're sharing where we're going, you're bringing people into the vision. You're not just telling them we're going to the moon and Mars and Jupiter. You're giving them where we're going, and then you're helping them figure out how we're going to get there. So it's inspirational is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Authenticity. How many times have we heard somebody come on a podcast or a news and read talking points, or at a conference they're just reading their script?
Mm-hmm.
In today's world, we really want people who are authentic. I can't really read the screen because I don't have my glasses on. I'm totally authentic with you at the moment. There's no scripting here. It's people want to know that what they look you in the eye and you say what you mean, and you mean what you say, and you do what you say you'll do. And so it's really important to be authentic. And authentic also means being trustworthy. So we talked a lot about artificial intelligence and the impact on jobs, and I keep coming back to that. And it's critical for leaders, not only in the space industry where there's already technology, but in every industry. I highlighted Lowe's. It's important. And I heard this story from the Lowe's CEO. So this wasn't something I read. I heard him give an interview talking about how they're using artificial intelligence in the Lowe's stores. Here is an out of this world leader right here at Lowe's, because he's inspirational. He's talking to his employees and he's telling them authentically how we're going to bring artificial intelligence into our stores and help you do a better job and help us serve our customers better. And then that last trait is gratitude. How many times have we heard leaders get out and they're grateful for everything they have? I worked for an amazing leader in the Air Force, Major General Al Flowers. He was the longest serving airman in the United States Air Force, started as an enlisted airman, retired as a 2-star general. And he always started every speech, every time he talked, with gratitude, thanking people for everything they have done. And I share also, I interviewed in my first book, the book you can buy, Machiko Gozen, who is a female samurai warrior. And she says, we're standing on the shoulders of all our ancestors. None of us are where we are today. I hear, I didn't have a mentor. Even if you didn't have a mentor officially, you've had a family, you've had ancestors, you've had individuals, and you're standing on their shoulders, just like we are standing on the shoulders of the Apollo era, reaching for Mars and beyond.
Mm-hmm. I love the bit about gratitude. My mom always says to have an attitude of gratitude. And so I try to operate with that as a mantra. But, I wanted to ask a little bit more about that inspirational pillar that you just mentioned. Um, you know, right now we're in like the next phase of the space industry. We witnessed the golden age, Apollo missions. We saw humans get to the moon. How do we inspire the next generation, the generation that didn't witness that wasn't seeing it for the first time? Space has been a part of our lives for people that are millennials or that are, now in Gen Z. It's not anything necessarily new to them because it's been around their entire lives. How do we inspire the next generation to be interested in space, and why is it important?
So I think it's less about being excited about space, because that's a very nebulous concept. And I say that because I've met college students who are geniuses. And when I talk about the space industry, they go, oh, that's just too big for me. I can't think about space. So we're making this thing space, like this thing on a shelf that only certain people can have or touch or do. And I think that's part of what I'm trying to do. Let's take space off the shelf. Space is part of our everyday life and everybody can be part of it. And I think what we need to do is highlight not space is going to the moon and Mars and beyond. We should, but it's also about all the careers. It's sales, it's marketing, it's interviewing, it's media, it's business development, it's C-level suites, it's board of directors. There's all these different opportunities. And what we need to do is we also need to bring space into the classroom. Right now, space might be an after school activity like a robotics club, or space is about memorizing planets, or it's about history, what we did. We've talked about Apollo era many times. You said the golden era of space. I really hope that the Apollo era is not the golden era of space. I hope that it's the foundation, but I'm looking forward to what the future, maybe it's the platinum era of space is.
There we
So
go.
we need to bring space into the classroom so that kids see this as an everyday thing, that it's fun, it's understandable, it's how they can engage, it's about career opportunities. It's like, I could be in space, but I don't have to be an astronaut or a rocket scientist. I could go into this, I could get a business degree, I could get a marketing degree, I could be a writer. There's all these different career fields that they could do. And we need to make it relatable and fun in the classroom, which is where it starts. And I think that's what's really important. So for your audience, your teachers out there, there's lots of free material with NASA and other organizations where you can bring space into the classroom with some hands-on activities. For parents and grandparents, you can take your kids and your kids' friends to a science center or museum, or go looking stargazing. And for community leaders, if you're running a company and you're in the space industry or space adjacent, right? Maybe you're not building the rocket, but you're doing other activities that relate to building the rocket. Maybe you can have student field trips come through. You're a meteorologist. Maybe you could have students come through because, we're getting all our weather from satellites, really understanding the weather. Plus, how does the sun's weather and solar weather impact the earth weather? And so, can you bring student field trips through your company? Can you sponsor some student field trips to activities? So there's a way for us as individuals to make space really tangible and inspire that next generation.
100%. Absolutely agree with you. Within the Mars Society Ambassador Program, we have a ton of teachers, and we have individuals that specifically go out and do public outreach for students and to try to get kids interested in pursuing those careers. And that's something that I've tried to emphasize when I go on those speaking engagements and talk to kids, that like, hey, you don't necessarily have to be an astronaut. There is a lot of other jobs and opportunities out there. And it's not just being, a scientist or an engineer and being an astronaut is the only job. There's a lot of other opportunities. And that's something I wish that I had known as a child. Maybe I would have pursued space a little bit earlier if I had known that I could mix communications and business, as what my background is and what I'm interested in. How could I mix that with space? If I had known that a little bit earlier, hey, maybe I would have, been a podcaster a lot earlier than I started. But I think that lesson resonates with a lot of people that are listening, a lot of our ambassadors as well.
Absolutely. So I think it's important, and I appreciate all that the Mars Society is doing to help elevate that. and bring that level of engagement, hands-on activity, and making learning fun. Because when you're having fun, it doesn't feel like you're learning, and you're going to remember what you just experienced. And then you're going to take that excitement home, and you're going to tell your parents, and then they're going to get excited too, and understand that space is something that you could do for your career. Because it's, we talk about our mutual friend Desmond, who started his space in Cameroon, and he'll tell me how his family didn't want him to pursue space because they didn't want him to get hurt, because there's no space in Cameroon. But he was passionate, and so he had to, shut off the outside voices, I'll call it, so that he could focus on his dream. And he had to leave Cameroon to take a journey that led him eventually to the United States to be part of the space industry. So we have to make sure that it's not just kids we're inspiring, but we're also helping communities and parents to understand these real opportunities in the space industry. As a matter of fact, most of these opportunities in the space industry are right here on Earth.
Right here on Earth, right in your community. There was another one of our ambassadors who was telling me a story that she, in Ghana, she is helping teach and inspire students. And those students are actually teaching their parents who don't know anything about space. And so to your point, just to reiterate what you said there, you're inspiring those kids, and those kids are going to inspire other people as well, their family, their friends, those in their community. And so that, it's not just those individuals that we're influencing, but it's a lot greater, and the impact can be felt at multiple levels.
Absolutely.
I'm curious. I know we're coming up towards the end of our time here, but just looking ahead, what makes you excited about the next decade in the space industry, and where do you see yourself playing a role in its trajectory?
Well, I'm really excited. I mean, as I shared, the next 10 years, replacing the ISS with new commercial space stations, going to the moon. What does that look like? Going on to Mars. Do we become the interplanetary species in the next 10 years? That might be a bit challenging. One of my good friends, Dr. Jack Gregg, wrote a book about the cosmic economy, the cosmos economy, about a real economy off planet. What does that look like? Because to have a real economy off planet, there has to be a return on investment. There has to be activity that relates to the commercialization. So I'm really excited to not only see us as humanity go back to the moon and onto Mars and beyond, but how do we create the real economy, the return on investment, and create that synergy that I'm really looking for, because that will allow this to go beyond a government activity that's really research focused and become a true commercial economic engine, not only for the United States, but all around the world.
Yeah.
And the role I'm playing, well, that's good. I'm hopefully the role I'm playing is the book, the speaking events. My next speaking event is going to be in Saudi Arabia. I'm speaking at LEAP and Deep Fest. I'm going to be on the LEAP space stage, talking about what space got to do with it. And I'm going to talk about space in our daily lives. I'm also going to be doing a talk on the investor stage at LEAP. And then later in the week, I'll be at Deep Fest talking about space and AI, because Deep Fest is about deep technology. So those are some of the things I hope to do. And then I hope to meet aspiring entrepreneurs, investors, as well as government agencies. Governments, it all starts with leadership. Everything we've talked about today, that's the first chapter of the next book, An Interstellar Guide to Success. The first chapter is actually leadership, because it all starts with leadership in the boardroom, in the C-suite, in the frontline supervisors. And so it's going to be those politicians, just like here in the US. President Kennedy said, I have a dream that we will put a man on the moon and safely return him to Earth. He was a politician who said, this is what we're going to do. Congress created the legislation that allowed for SpaceX to become a company and have commercial rockets, and all the other companies. So it really takes emerging countries that want to be in the space industry. It starts with their governments taking that leadership role. And that's where I can tie in as a strategy advisor, whether it's on the government side or the commercial side, helping to create the strategy for what's best for each of those emerging space nations to be part of the collective of the space industry, because the United States cannot do it all alone. It's very expensive to go to space. We need partners and allies to go with us. And so how do we help to unlock those partners with us?
Mm-hmm. You've got a lot of exciting things coming up and books and talks. And how can people stay up to date on what you're doing? Where can people go to find more information?
Absolutely. Well, I do have the Shelli Brunswick website, so you can go to shellibrunswick.com. So that's one good place. The other one we talked about significantly is LinkedIn. I post everything on LinkedIn. The books and all the speaking events are also on the website. So I look forward to seeing you and everyone else around the galaxy.
We absolutely will. And we're going to keep tabs on what you're doing. Well, Shelli, thank you so much for being here and for speaking with me. It's been a pleasure, and I've learned a lot, and excited to see what you do next.
Thank you. And I'll be watching you as well, because we're all in this together. As the Maori of New Zealand say, we're all in this together, and we're all on planet Earth. We're all on this big rock that's already in space. So we're already in space looking to push out to go to other planetary bodies.
I love that. That's a great place for us to finish today. Again, thank you so much. Appreciate everybody that tuned in. Special thank you to our executive director James Berg, our PR director Michael Stoltz. Thank you everybody who joined in the conversation, who participated and asked questions. We appreciate you. But we're going to finish today like we always do. The best is yet to come. Thanks everybody. Thanks, Shelli.